Welcome to Ring the Damn Bell. I have a very special guest that I'm so excited to have on the podcast. But before we get to him, I want to remind everybody Saturday, March 29th at the Fairless High School in Aurora, Ohio, there is an amazing event. It's called Dylan's Fight Against Autism. This event, all the proceeds goes to help fighting autism. This is so amazing, and they have some amazing people that are going to be there. We have Mike Knox, we have Travis Murdoch. There's a Universal title match happening. Baby Doll and Scotty Rich from WCW is going to be there also for a meet and greet. So if you guys are going to Ohio or you live in Ohio or you want a quick getaway and you're professional wrestling fans, I highly suggest that you guys check this out. For more information, you can go to my Facebook page. Just type in KG Landry or RDTV on Facebook, and there's a link there. You can buy tickets on Eventbrite, but I strongly suggest that you guys check this out if you're looking to do something. I am obviously not a legend. I am not going to be there for meet and greet as I should be, but I will be there. So if you recognize this ugly mug, just come say hello to me. My wife and I will be attending this event. So let's get to our guest, Casey Anthony, who has a very extensive career in professional wrestling. I think you've had 63 matches. Am I correct, Casey?
How many?
63.
63?
Just for now, the 63 is just at matches at promos that are known. I'm sure you've had more than that if you include independent.
Well, 20 years worth of it. So, you know, some days I was wrestling 300 days a year. So I've had a few matches.
Yep. I want to get into your childhood because I kind of want to start way from the beginning. Uh, what kind of childhood did you have, and where were you raised at?
I was born in Michigan and moved around a little Midwest a little bit. Ended up finally in South Florida, Southwest Florida, in Fort Myers, and was there for a few years. That's where I found my love for professional wrestling. And then I grew up in Orlando, Florida, and that's where it all started for me.
So, what promotion did you start watching first?
Oh, it was championship wrestling from Florida with Gordon Soley.
Garden Solely. Yeah, talk about a legend. Uh,
Oh yeah.
so at what age did you decide, man, I really want to do this for a living?
Probably about 11 years old.
Oh wow.
Yeah,
Oh wow.
everyone's like, sure kid, and I just stuck with it. And my parents were really big wrestling fans. They in Michigan in the '70s, they used to go to the whole in the Sheik's territory for big time wrestling. They used to follow it around everywhere. They used to go to Coble Hall in Detroit. They used to go all over the place, Lansing, and just hit the whole circuit, just watching the big wrestling fans. And we moved down to Florida, and they were watching like the Madison Square Garden network, and I
Mhm.
was like, oh, this stuff sucks. I went to my room, and then one day it was on TV. It was like noon and on Saturday at noon, and it was you heard Gordon Soley and then Dusty Rhodes was cutting a promo, and I was just like, "That's it. I love it. That's what I want to do." And I was just obsessed with it, and it's just escalated from there.
So, being that your parents were big wrestling fans, when you told them you wanted to be a professional wrestler, were they very supportive of that, or were they? You're 11 years old. You don't know what you want to be yet.
No, I mean, I was very consistent with it, even all the way through high school and everything. And everyone's like, "Yeah, sure, kid, sure, kid, sure, kid." And then on the first time they see me on TV, and then they're asking for tickets when we're, wrestling, for they can go to it. So, I started in high school though. My dad took me. There was a little independent show. It, um, it was Jerry Gray's promotion, and in Orlando, and it happened to be across the street at the fairgrounds from where I was going to school at. So my dad, and it said at the bottom of the poster, it said, "Learn to become a professional wrestler." And I knew who Jerry was because, I watched Championship Wrestling from Florida, and he was a little part of it. He's the Bahamas champion, everything. Had a big feud with Tyree Pride and all that. So my dad took me over there and signed all the paperwork, signed up, and that's when I had my first. I was 15 when I had my first training session, and we just went on from there. It just I was fortunate that Jerry Gray, and Jerry gets a bad rap from a lot of people. And don't get me wrong, I'm not defending him by any means. He's done a lot of crazy stuff, crazy promoting um, people that are not even on the show, stuff like that. He's trained guys that were good, and then he trained guys that were just taking the money. But myself personally, I was fortunate because he lived 2 blocks from me when I grew up. So he would always call me, "Hey, what are you doing?" And he had a 20 by 20 20 by 20 ring in the backyard. And he'd call me and say, "Hey, let's work out." I'd get on my bike and pedal over there, and we'd work out for an hour, 2 hours. And we did it all the time and just wrestle for hours back there. And all they did is help me grow and develop into, a better wrestler. I actually trained for 1 year, which you don't hear about this anymore. Guys train for 6 weeks and get in the ring and think they're a wrestler, and they don't know their, elbow from their asshole. Um, you know, so I trained for 1 whole year before I had my first match.
Oh wow! And now this is the internet, so it may be incorrect, but was your first match against Jim Powers?
No, no, um, no, I wrestled Jim in WCW like in um the late
96.
mid nine late 90s, 96, 97. Yeah, I started in 1989, 88, 89, right at the tail end is when I started in the business. And my first match on WCW was in 1990, and it was a tag team match against Ron Simmons and Butch Reed as Doom.
Oh wow, wow.
Yeah.
So, going back to your training a little bit though, so was there anything that you struggled with while the training? Any particular move or run set?
Not really. I mean, because I always, growing up, wrestled in the living room with my brother. And from day one, I could walk in and throw a drop kick and hit you right in the face and land the right way on your stomach and everything. Um, it was a challenge to learn how to punch without really killing people,
Mhm.
and that's just learning over time. A lot of people hang a tennis ball on a string and try to punch it without moving the tennis ball. I used a mirror, so I had accountability. If I broke the mirror and messed up my hand, that means I was hitting too hard. So that's how I learned. I was a little extreme,
Right.
but I put everything into it. That was what I wanted to do, and you know, as I got older and developed, I got in. I had the whole package where I got into great shape. I had a tan. I had the outfits. I had everything. So I mean, it's it's a process. It takes time. It takes time to learn the business. It takes time to learn how to call a match properly.
Right. And
And you really don't you know how to call a match and understand the psychology of it. It takes at least a good 5 years for all that.
yeah, so a lot of the wrestlers that I've interviewed, what seems to be the main thing in common when they go to wrestling school is there is, according to them, there's a big difference between being in cardio shape and jogging or running outside and wrestling shape,
Oh,
ring shape. So, did you
yeah.
struggle with getting into ring shape?
No, I was always in good shape. I know what you're saying. Yeah, that's definitely completely true. It took time to build it up. Yeah, I mean, I didn't struggle, but it wasn't just I walked in and I didn't get blown up. It takes time to learn how to get conditioned for the ring. It's just like my son was an amateur wrestler. He wrestled from 5 years old all the way through Division 1 in college. And there's a difference between being in shape and then being in wrestling shape. He can run all he wants, but if he's not on the mat going through that, it's the same thing with professional wrestling. So I could do all the cardio in the gym, I could run sprints, I could do all that, but you go in a 16 by 16-foot ring and you're just going to get blowed up until you learn, you know, and it's not always about being in the greatest cardio shape, um, but it's learning how to move in the ring. You want from one rope to the other, you want to take like 3 steps and turn, maybe four if it's a 20 by 20 ring. So, taking the corners in the same way. So when you see people, first thing I look at someone when they're wrestling, if you see them get shot off the ropes and they take up like 5, 6 steps and they're like a bunch of little steps like that, they don't know how to work. Plain and simple. They're the shits.
Right.
They don't, because there's a way that you big strides in the ring and you learn not to get blowed up. It's mind over matter, learning how to control your breathing to settle it down, settle your heart rate down before you can get up and go again. you know. But after you've wrestled, I was fortunate enough. When I started with Jerry Gray, I did 2 gimmicks. I wrestled as myself, Casey Thompson, like at the beginning, first match, and at the end of the match, I wrestled as under a mask as the American Samurai.
Mhm.
And so I wrestled babyface the first match, and then I'll switch and wrestle heel the last match against Jerry. And he was a great teacher and a good ring general at the time to lead me, what to do. And he called these elaborate high spots with like 30 things in it. He'd call everything in the ring. We never talked before the match. I would get the referee would come over and say, "This is the finish." Well, I knew the finish all the time. It was a DDT because Jerry used to be roommates with Jake the Snake Roberts and Gene Anderson back in the day. So it was the DDT. So we would wrestle and everything was called in the ring. We didn't discuss anything and we wrestled 30-minute matches, 45-minute matches, 1 hour matches, so that helped you to get in being great condition to be able to just go. But wrestling twice a night, helped me because it helped me. The first match I was calling everything,
Mhm.
and so I was the leader of the match because I had someone that was under me trying to learn, and I was doing the same thing in the last match. So it was a great opportunity, and I always, give him credit for it. Um, he really helped me out a lot early in my career in the business.
So I want to go back. You talked about wrestling under a mask. How difficult is that? I imagine you talked about cardio. I imagine your breathing is much more difficult under a mask and being able to control your breathing than it is if you don't have a mask. Or am I way off?
No, it's very difficult, and mine was blacked out too, so I couldn't even. I had to learn how to see through it. And I mean, my mask changed various times. I mean, I even had a long weave put in it to have really long hair. You name it, I did it all, and it had beads in it and all crazy stuff. But what I did is I would also practice in it, and then to really get used to it at the beginning, I slept in it.
Oh
When I
wow.
go into bed, I'd put the mask on and sleep with a mask on. And it definitely, once you got used to it, it's like people that sleep with a CPAP machine, it takes
Mhm.
forever to get used to wearing that mask when you're sleeping. But once you get used to it and you go to sleep, you don't want to go to sleep without that mask on. So it's the same thing wrestling. You get used to wearing that mask, you get comfortable in it, and it's like you don't even have nothing on. But it's kind of great because you can do a lot of the talking under there and no one can see your lips moving or anything like that. So it was a good learning experience to be able to do both of it, at the same time. And because I had to wrestle one style when I was myself, and then when I was the American Samurai, I had to wrestle another style. So it taught me a lot.
So you talked about the very first match that you had. You're the one that called the match versus the second match you had under the mask.
Mhm.
You were or you. I'm sorry, Jerry was calling the match the first time you wrestled, and then the second time you were. How difficult is it to be wrestling against someone who was calling the match? When you factor in the crowd noise and things like that, is it something that's really difficult to do, especially on your first time?
Well, my first match, like in the business, for the longest time, I just shut up and listened. You're not going to call the match with you'll be in your first, 50, 60 matches, 100 matches. You're not really going to, in a real wrestling setting, you're not going to call anything. You're going to have you're going to have a leader in there and you're going to learn from him. And then after I got established a little bit with his promotion, is when I started calling the matches um, that I was wrestling as myself. And then later in the main event, I would wrestle Jerry under the mask and he would call the match. And I was pretty easy because the styles were different. Jerry wrestled a lot different than I wrestled. Um, and it was easy because he knew what I wanted to do as the American Samurai. So he would just factor it all in when he was calling it. My stuff, I just called what I wanted to do because I usually always first match. So we're going to have between like a 7 to 10 minute match, just real quick, just to set the pace, jerk that curtain and everything. So that's what I would try to do is just, have a really good first match to open it up and set the tone for the whole night.
So when you started calling the matches, and you said, today's wrestlers, a lot of times they'll practice, they meet with one another, they know what they're going to do a lot of times before the match. What was your preparation, knowing that you were going to face someone and you're calling the match? Was this something you did on the fly? Is this something you prepared for before the match?
I was just doing on the fly.
Wow.
I would just they're like, "What do you want to do?" I'm like, "I will just call it out there." Sometimes we just go over the opening spot we wanted to do, and where the cutoff point is, where the heel takes over, and then go into the finish. And then sometimes you know, you don't even see the guy. A referee comes with the finish, and you know, you don't even see the guy until you get in the ring. Because back when I started, there's still a lot of kayfabe was going on. So you weren't allowed to ride together. I mean, all that stuff. They're real particular about it. If you wore a mask, you put your mask on before you got to the building. Put a towel over your head. It was back in those times.
Right, right. Yeah, you and I are the same age. I'm 52 as well. And
Okay.
one thing that has always aggravated me was Vince McMahon and even Eric Bischoff taking the credit for uh they called it the Attitude Era, but really it was reality based wrestling. Now, growing up watching Mid South Wrestling, Bill Watts' Mid South Wrestling,
Yeah.
that was reality based wrestling. And a lot of your southern territories, that's exactly what they did way before
Yeah.
the Attitude Era. As someone who was involved in my generation of professional wrestling, has that does that aggravate you at all, or is it whatever it is, what it is?
It is what it is. Because first the first thing that you realize in the business, like, oh, I'm gonna steal there's someone just stole my move. Well, guess what? You stole it from someone else because there's nothing original in wrestling.
Right.
Everything's been done more than once. So, um, it's just how wrestling evolves and changes and recycles. It repeats itself every so many years. It goes in cycles and everything. I think we're on a really big upswing right now. I don't know if it's ever going to get as big as what it did during the Attitude Era, during the Monday Night Wars. But I think the business is sitting in a pretty good spot right now,
Yeah.
position.
I've always thought that regardless of AW, WWE, TNA, it's like we're just one promo away from something big happening because Steve Austin, when he did that 316 promo on the fly, that had a lot to do with the explosion of the Attitude Era. So I've always thought we were one promo away from being that. But I do agree, fans don't. I don't think fans appreciate how much wrestling that we have because of the tribalism that we have within professional wrestling.
Yeah.
Are you someone that keeps up with all brands? Are you loyal just to one promotion?
No, I turn it on occasionally. Since myself and Kevin Kelly has started our podcast, In Ring Wrestling Podcast, um, we weren't going to talk about any current products, and as everything evolves, the show evolved, and So we started talking more and more about the current state of wrestling and things like that. And our producer's always like, "Oh, what about this? What about that?" And I'm like, "Oh, you guys are gonna force me to have to watch wrestling." So I turn on the product here and there. I turned on AEW the other night for about maybe 45 seconds to a minute and a half, and I'm like, "Okay, that's it. I'm done with that." And I said I'll watch it till I watch something, and just like it just turns me off, and it was that fast. Um, I was watching. Um, I turned on the Elimination Chamber, and it was right at the end when the big turn with Cena, and then they had the after show with what's her name, Bianca
Yeah, Bianca there.
Belair,
Yeah,
and that was horrendous. I mean, I don't know if you saw it.
I did.
It looked like it was reality, um, confessional. It was a bunch of shit, is what it was. It was just horrible. She was horrible. I mean, it just totally turned me off. I'm like, it ended on a great. The show ended great. That was just took it down 10 notches for me.
Yeah, I
I
often
mean,
say
I don't know if you
sometimes
saw that part or not.
I did. I've often said sometimes less is better. Um, leave some things to mystery. It's funny because when John Cena turned, it's been a long time in the making. But I tell you, as good as it was, it didn't touch when Hulk Hogan turned heel with WCW. In my opinion, fans were pissed off, throwing shit. Not that people should be
Oh
throwing stuff
yeah.
in the ring, but you can just tell that emotion was there. But I want to get back to you and the beginning of your career, and I don't mean to drag out the calling the match and stuff like that. It's just I'm so intrigued with that. One more question about that. When you first started and you were actually starting to call matches, did you prefer to call the matches or did you prefer your opponent to call the match?
Back in my day, the heel always called. Most of the time, the heel always called the match, unless it was I was the baby face and I was more experienced and I called the match. But most of my career, I always called the match,
Okay.
always, you know. And I was in a tag team for many years, and I called from the corner the match for all four of us just from the
Oh,
corner.
wow.
I didn't let other people call our matches. I'm like, no, I'll call it all because, it's an art of learning how to call a match.
Mhm.
And to me, a wrestling match is like riding a roller coaster where you all you know, the anticipation of going up and then you go down and it stops and all of a sudden you just go flying down and curves and swerves and upside down. That's how a wrestling match should be. You want to
Right.
keep them on their feet. You want to be, things I do at the beginning of the match make sense later in the end of the match. You're like, oh, that's why he did that. Things like that. And they don't do that now because I would go to, get the reaction from the crowd and I could dictate what I wanted them to do by what I did. And they don't do that no more because it's not a wrestling company, it's a more television base. So they don't care about the crowd. They care about only the viewers on TV because that's where they're making, their big amount of money. So you'll see a lot of people on TV. There's not a lot of interaction with the crowd and stuff like that. And that's just how it is. But also they choreograph their whole entire match from the beginning to the end. So sometimes you have to, change it because of what's going on in the crowd. And that's what I did. I would, call it. I would read the crowd and figure out what I wanted to do next as I was in the ring, just going.
So and from what you just said, I'm guessing there's yes, but you think the preparing for the match and getting everything written up and memorizing and practicing, do you think that takes away from the wrestling match and even kind of cheat the fans?
Oh, I mean, I do. I mean, because what happens if you get lost?
Right.
You don't know what to do. I've seen it. I've seen the deer in the headlight look so many times. And that's usually when the guy gets cut off and starts getting pounded on until he can figure out, when you're trying to remember, say, a 15-minute match, everything you got to do for 15 minutes, that takes a while to learn. I was the kind of person that if you told me a spot one time, it could have 30 things in it. I could tell it to you backwards, and I just
Wow.
remembered it. I had a great memory for that.
Right.
My biggest fear was when I was in there. that I would be able to hear them call it, because you wrestle some of these, old timers like Mike Graham. I wrestled him, and he'd all be the whole time he had been in a headlock doing, that's how he was calling the match. Dick Slater is like the whole, time doing the same thing, doing, you had guys doing, making noises and like that, and you're like, okay, you're trying to hear in between all that, whether and they're just trying to cover it up for the crowd doesn't see what
Right.
they're doing or hear what they're doing. And I just had a different way to do it. I just always was just talking, just talking, and I'll look at the referee and say, "Tell him to tackle me, drop down, reverse hip toss, arm drag, drop kick, powder out." And then the referee would go yell at him and tell him the whole spot. We go, ready, let's go, come on, and we go and we do the whole thing. So and as I was drop kicking him, calling out something else to do.
Right.
So and I never had the problem with people saying, "Oh, look, he's talking," because I was able to, make it where it, wasn't visible.
Yeah. So in your wrest- how long in your wrestling career was it before you went to WCW? And when you got that call to go to WCW, what was um you know how did you feel about that?
Um, it was I 1990, so about a year and a half me into the business, I got to go, and um, it was I knew I was going there to do the job and put someone over and all that. So I was fine with it because I was so young in the business. I just wanted to work, and I knew I wasn't going to change the wrestling business at that time. So, but it was great, because now you're sitting in the locker room with the best of the best, the guys that are figured in on TV that have a deal and all that stuff, and you get to know them after a while and everything, and then they really start helping you. I mean, it's kind of weird. You would think that wrestling a television match you're not going to learn, but there's so much you can learn from a 3-minute match that is unbelievable.
So was it so the early '90s when you went there? Did they start doing the guaranteed payout contracts yet?
No, no,
No,
no.
no.
I
Okay.
mean, um, well, a few guys had not like guaranteed. They had their um they had I knew what they were making a week, but Um, no one had a guarantee contract then. That came years and
Years
years
later.
later.
Yeah, I feel like people in your generation who were wrestling was truly doing it for the love of the sport versus the money. I'm sure, yeah, people want to make more money, but back then, they were making 50, $100 a match, whatever it was. It wasn't nearly what they're making now. Uh, do you think that today's wrestlers are wrestling because of the love of the sport, or do you think a lot of them are doing it just to become famous and to become rich?
Well, I mean, just look who they're recruiting for NXT. They're recruiting. It was when Jerry Briscoe was doing the recruiting. He recruited only top level amateur wrestlers. And look at his history of the people he recruited. You had, Shelton Benjamin, you had Bobby Lashley, you had Brock Lesnar, I mean, Gable Stevenson, which he's left now, but he was just that kid was just incredible, everything he can do. But and then now they're recruiting like basketball players,
Mhm.
they're all Division One or high level athletes, soccer players, track stars, swimmers, stuff like that. So they're going to go into a sport that they have know nothing of. They're not going in for the love of it. They're going in it because they're going to make money and become a star.
Right. Back those days, you often hear a lot of wrestlers who started way back when talking about having to sleep in their vehicle, or 20 of them in the same apartment or hotel. Did you go through those struggles as far as having to sleep in your car, or did
I
you?
never had to sleep in my car. I mean, we've slept in the cars just to drive through to get to the next town and stuff
Right.
like that. We have, slept, in I'm not really sure whose place it was, but meet someone, go back to their place and sleep or whatnot. But we would pack like you know six guys in a car to keep the prices, the cost down. Yeah, everyone does that, It's just part of what, part of the business, paying your dues and everything. So,
Right.
but it's I've had it where we've had four, five, six, seven to a room,
Yeah.
So, but it was all good. It's just part of the process.
Yeah. Going back to Jim Powers, aka the Ultimate Warrior. Whenever you wrestled him, was that a match that you called? And if so, was it as difficult working with him as everyone has said it was?
No, if you're wrestling a television match, they're gonna call their match. You just do what they want. I mean, if you wrestle the guy enough times, you know, like I wrestled Sid Vicious so many times. And I'm like, hey Sid, I was thinking we could do this, the really, showcase this and to look for you. And he's like, oh yeah, I like that. Let's do this. So there's some matches where I've called a bunch of the spots beforehand, and or like I wrestled Dick Slater and Mike Enos, who was one of the Beverly Brothers when they were rough and ready, and Dickie come up to me. He's like, because we've wrestled a bunch before. He's like, hey, you want to take that bump? Because I used to take a bump that I do like a handstand in the corner and do a flip to the floor, and so then me Enos, I was like, hey, that reverse slam you do, let's do it off the top rope. He's like, oh, I don't know if I can do that. I said, I'll make myself light. Don't worry. Just, pop up there. Let's do it. And he's like, all right, that's cool. It happens to be a very interesting match. It was at MGM Studios when we were wrestling down there. And it happens to be when the first thing was Mike did the reverse slam off the top rope. My foot actually kicked the camera and the camera went flying and broke. I didn't know that happened at that point. And then they do a couple things and Dickie gets in there. He's like, hey, you ready for your bump? Take your bump. I'm like, yep. So he shoots me off. I do the handstand. As I'm coming down, you can see it on TV. Um, the camera guy is like real close, getting a tight um, shot on it. And it was Jackie Crockett, who's been around since Georgia champion, been around forever,
Right.
with the Crockett promotion, and I landed on top of him and the camera and shattered that camera. So at that point, I was really trying to, land the job and everything. And I heard the referee said, "Go to the booking office." And then he said, "Casey, go to the booking office too." I'm like, okay, because all the referees had IFBs where the back could talk to them. So um, I go to and then I'm thinking, oh, you know what? This is cool. They're finally realizing I'm taking some good bumps for them. Making their guys look good. Maybe they're going to give me a chance. I was kind of thinking, and so as I was getting because they got there first, because I was still in the ring selling and all that stuff, getting to the back, and then they were sliding out behind me as I was going in. Enos was like, all the drinks are on me tonight at the bar. And I'm like, oh shit. I said, this isn't going to be good. So this is the landscape of everyone that was in there. Arn Anderson was one of the agents and one of the assistants for Kevin Sullivan, that was the head booker. So Arn was doing the talking. Kevin was in there, which was the head booker. You had Paul Orndorff, which was Kevin's assistant and one of the agents. You had Terry Taylor, which was one of the agents. Mike Graham, which was one of the agents. You had the Eric Bischoff, the president of WCW. He was in there. Jimmy Hart was in there. Hulk Hogan was in there, and Ric Flair was in there. So it's like the holy grail of
Right.
executives back at that time. And Arn Anderson was doing the talk, and he's like, Casey, we really appreciate all that you do for us. I'm like, okay. He says, but we can't have you break in not one but two $60,000 cameras in one match. And I'm like, okay. I'm like, yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't realize, the camera guy was right there. I was just trying to make you guys look. No, he says, no, no, we get it. You're, he said, you're here for a reason. That's why you bring you up all the time, is because you do such good work for us. He says, but if you just mess up the spot, because if you messed up a spot, especially in WWF in that time, if you messed up a spot, you just reran it and they'll just edit it all out in post and it looks perfect in the match.
Right.
So he's like, if you can mess it up, just redo it and we'll fix it in post. He says, hell, it's cheaper if you hurt yourself and we can cheaper to fix you than to pay $120,000 in cameras. And I was kind of like, oh, I'm like, hey, I have a question. I'm like, yeah, I said, am I still getting paid today? They're like, yeah, you're getting paid. I'm like, okay. So, um, the next day I was kind of like down, because, it's kind of a,
Right.
big thing. There's a lot of big guys in that room. So the next day I'm walking by, and I've known Kevin Sullivan since I was 15 years old,
Mhm.
and known him on a personal level, knew him very, very well, and ended up till the day he passed, I was very close friends with him. And so he walked to me and said, he was like, "Hey, baby, how many cameras are gonna break today, Casey?" Ah, ha, ha, ha. I just started laughing. I'm like, all right, so I feel a little better if the head booker is just laughing about it. And then Orndorff came in. Orndorff really liked me. He used to always critique all my matches and just kind of like lay into me all the time. And but he wasn't doing it. He only did it because he liked me and he seen something in me, so he was trying to help me progress, in the business. And he's like, you know what? F those cameras if they're in the way. I hate camera guys. You know what? They need to get out of your way. If they're in your way again, break that camera. I'm like, all right. So I was like, oh, this is cool. There's no problems.
Right. Yeah.
So, but then I wrestled guys like Alex Wright, and we both would call the match. He'd call his part, I'd call my part, you know,
Yeah.
because I wrestled him so many times. We always had really good matches. So, I would just cut him off, take over, and just call it all. We just called pretty much everything out there. He liked to call a lot in the back, though, but
Yeah.
it was fine.
Yeah. You mentioned a couple names. Dick Murdoch, uh, Kevin Sullivan, two of the greatest wrestlers that is so underrated in my opinion. Paul Wardorf too. Uh,
Oh, yeah.
Kevin Sullivan was so smart when it came to professional wrestling and everything
Oh,
that
yeah.
he did. But and I know you talked a lot about it, but can you take me through your WCW career, including a couple of matches, and who was the who was the most difficult person to wrestle with? Maybe not because they were jerks, but maybe because of trying to call the match, or they were too stiff, or any reason that you felt like this is the guy I just don't like getting in the ring with.
Yeah, wrestling stiff didn't really bother me because I wrestled stiff all the time, but I was protective. I was stiff in the right places. There's guys out there. I used to wrestle years ago. I used to wrestle Big Van Vader a lot, and he was just an asshole. He gave no regards to if you're going to get hurt. I've seen him break guys' noses. I've seen him break a guy's neck, and he didn't care. So I mean, he's had me in the corners, just trying to kill you and stuff like that. And um, so he I couldn't stand wrestling him because he's just always in business for himself. And then you had other guys like say like a Flying Brian that would call a million spots, and change them a million times. And then you have guys like Marcus Bagwell when he first started, he'd call a bunch of spots in the back and get out there and forget what he's calling.
Hmm.
You're like, oh, what were we supposed to do? This is your match, but I'm cutting you off or we don't look stupid. So it's the thing you did when you're doing TV matches. If they screwed up, you cut them off and started, taking over until they figured out what to do, and then they, take it back over and everything.
Yeah,
But
there was
um,
there was a few. There's been a couple of shoots that I've watched about Van Vader, and one of the things that they said, well, besides him being an asshole, you kind of said exactly what most have said. But they also said that one thing horrible about wrestling Van Vader was because he didn't wash his gear.
he smelled, yeah,
He smelled. Yeah, is
yeah,
that something you
yeah.
experienced?
That's true.
Wow. Yeah. So, uh, going through WCW, did you face people like Sting and a lot of those other guys that were well known?
Yeah, I wrestled Sting, Luger, the Horsemen. I mean, pretty much 90% of the roster.
Yeah,
We go up every week, and then when '96, when they moved from their headquarters from Atlanta to Orlando because of the '96 Olympic Games, Summer Games, because the Summer Games took over all the production in half the country, for filming and stuff like that. So they moved on and WCW had so many syndicated programs that they filmed so much that went all over the place, all over the world. And so they moved down to MGM Studios and actually used Disney's production company to produce the show. So, which was kind of cool because half of the production people didn't know who, they just knew you were a wrestler. And they didn't know if you were like a huge name or where you were at on the card. So you could like say, hey, just give me a heads up when I'm out there, I'm going to do this. So you might want to have the camera right near if you get a good shot. They're like, oh, okay. So you kind of, highlight when you know you're going to take a big bump or something like that, for they don't miss it or anything. Or I remember one time I had the hour off because down there we would wrestle 3 to 4 tapings a day, and it'd be 3 weeks straight for every 3 months. So that's how much TV we were shooting. So
Wow.
it was yeah, it was a great time, and because I was friends with Kevin Sullivan and Paul Orndorff, and Kevin told, like Terry Taylor, who was putting all the matches together, hey, take care of Casey, take care of him in his matches and make sure he wrestles all the time. So he wanted me on all the stuff. That way I'd make more money,
Right.
which I was very appreciative of. And, they gave me a bump in pay and stuff like that. So, that was all good. It was cool. And, so it was a interesting, like once I was just saying, like the production people didn't know who everyone was, so I was like, hey, listen, I was kind of working them. One of my buddies came to hang out, and I was like, hey, listen, I want to go into the park, but I don't have much time, and I don't have time for all the people, bugging me, talking to me and stuff. I just want to go and hit it and get back. They're like, oh yeah, this is before fast passes and all that. They had like Disney personnel walking us around from ride to ride. I think we were on Tower of Terror like 4 times,
Wow.
just right in a row. Like in 10 minutes, hit it 4 times. Did the whole park in like 35 minutes and was back at the sound stage.
Wow.
So my buddy's like, "This is cool." I'm like, "Yeah." You know,
So how
so it was
often?
fun out there.
Yeah. So
It's
how
fun out there, and
often?
we're all together. Because you'll hear them say, "Oh, the enhancement guys or job guys or extras, they have their own dressing room." That's not true. Everyone was always in the same dressing room. Like there was exceptions in WWF. Warrior had his own dressing room, and Hogan had his, and that's it. In WCW, um, before Hogan was there, everyone dressed the same. I've shared a changing area with Ric Flair before, where Flair, when we get there, we always try to find a place by ourselves to put our stuff and everything. And I think we were out in Kansas or something like that, and Flair walked in and was like, "Hey, it'd be all right if I change in here with you guys." We're in like the broiler room, right? Really hidden. And I'm like, fuck no, go get your own. And I'm like, no, I'm just playing. Come on in. And so he he changed, he shared, so we were all together, and then Hogan came in WCW. He had his own, own,
Right.
dressing room too. But we were all together, but especially when we're there for like, we got there at 8 a.m. We'd be there till like 3 or 4 in the afternoon. So we had all these hours just hanging out. So we're always doing stuff. And then we got out of there, we all ate and rested up and went out for half the night and was back there the next morning. So we all got to know each other really well, got to be pretty close, and had a lot of fun with a lot of the guys, over the years down there.
Yeah. So how often were you able to make it back home with you wrestling as much as you were?
At that point I lived in Orlando,
Okay.
so I was right there, but I actually
Yeah.
stayed at the hotel the whole time because it was just we I used to room with after the whole breaking the camera thing, and he said he'd buy all the drinks at the bar. Mike Enos, which I don't drink, so never did. So he I ended up just rooming with him and Jerry Lynn.
Oh
So I always
wow.
stayed in their room with them. So, but we were right there, and man, the millions of stuff happened then. So um, I've had it where Kidman got us kicked out of Baja Beach Club in Orlando, and Rey Mysterio was driving. Hugh Morris he had a big giant Lincoln Town Car, the real big
Uh,
ones, and he's like driving like this because he could barely see over the wheel and everything. So we're in the back of that, and he was all messed up, passed out, and ends up ripping the door panel off the. Me and Chavo were trying to get him out, and he ripped the door panel off. I said, I think he can just stay right there. He's like, I think so too, and we just left him to sleep it off in the car. I mean, we had every night was like that,
Right,
something
right.
crazy was happening.
Did you were you ever part of any ribs, or have you ever been ribbed?
Oh yeah, everyone has been ribbed.
Can you
There's
share
you
some
name
stories?
it, it's happened, to us. I mean, there's been I've seen the Mexican wrestlers all tied up to chairs because the Steiners have taped them to the chair, duct taped them to the chairs. Um, they'll padlock your bag um, up on the rafters. I mean, you name it, all kinds of stuff happen. I've been there I was been there when the ribs were so bad, like in WWF, where everyone would walk in with their bag, go to catering with their bag, eat. Everywhere they went, they had their bag with them. When they went to wrestle, they left it in the gorilla position because there was people that were taking, like, I guess, the lack of better words, there, defecating in people's bags.
Yeah, I
So,
heard Mr. Fuji was really bad about doing some things in people's bags.
yeah, I mean, Fuji was a big ribber, but I mean, these guys, this was Shawn Michaels and Marty Jannetty that was doing that to everyone's bag because they did it to when Chief Jay Strongbow was one of the agents and Chief was about to kill him. And so, but yeah, everyone was like terrified of that happening. They would literally walk around, everyone's walk around the whole day with their bag in their hand. And granted, we get there at 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon and we don't start wrestling until 7, 8 o'clock at night, and you got that bag in your hands just walking around. That was like that for a while. It's crazy.
Yeah, so talk to me about why you left WCW and went to WWE, and did you go? Did you go immediately from WCW to WWE?
Yeah, I said I was under contract, so I could wrestle for either one whenever I wanted to. So, I mean, there were sometimes I'd wrestle, I'd do TV on Monday, Tuesdays, and sometimes WWE was doing TV on Tuesday, Wednesdays. So when they were close enough, I would hit the Monday, Tuesday, and then hit the Wednesday, the last of the shots for W. So I'd get 3 days in a row doing TV, and then you give all the both companies were paying for the rent a cars, and WWE would pay for our rent a car and our room. So we just kind of double dipped as much as we possibly could, and just learn your way around the system to. Um, and I used to bring guys up with me too. And there's an old time wrestler, Mike Jackson,
Uh-huh.
that you might have seen him growing up. I was about to walk up there to get my pay. He's like, "Hey," he says, "How are you turning this? How are you turning in your trans and this and that? You either could go by the miles, or you can go by what your receipts were." He's like, always go by the miles, he says, and then add more miles to it and this and that. Next thing you know, I went did exactly what he said, and I had a big old stack of money like that. I'm like, oh, this is. And then he's like, make sure you let them know that you brought 3 guys with you because they're gonna grease you for bringing really good guys up. And they sure enough did. It's like, whoa, I got like a big pocket full of money plus my
Wow.
paydays. In
Yeah.
WWF, um they paid cash at the end of the night. You got it all right then. WCW, you could get a draw if you wanted a draw. If not, in 2 weeks, your check would come in the mail, which was kind of cool because then you knew when your check was coming in the mail from the last pay period, you're going to have, a bunch of money in it. So you kind of try to take as little as possible. And that's why we all bundled up in big, a lot of people in the rooms and stuff like that, just to try to be able to, the whole point was just trying not to have to go back and have a regular job. We just wanted to keep wrestling. So I would do Monday, Tuesday, TV, come back, be off back on Wednesday sometime, wrestle Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, go back up on Monday again. So I mean, I did that for the first 5 or 6 years that I started wrestling, you know, so maybe 6, 7 years I was doing that. And then I just started venturing out, going to wrestle different areas. And cross country, went to Puerto Rico. I mean, uh, tours over in the islands, different countries and stuff like that. So yeah, it was a lot of fun, a lot of traveling, a lot of um, loss of sleep, but you only live once.
Yeah. So was there a and obviously there was. Talk to me about working for Eric Bischoff versus working for Vince McMahon on a professional level.
Um, I mean, they're both business. So, I mean, Vince was, you didn't see Eric a lot like you did Vince. Vince was very hands-on everything. Eric was kind of, you see him walk in and be like, oh, Bischoff's here. You know, they kind of tell everyone real quick and stuff like that. And you see him in and out of the production meetings and stuff like that. Vince, you would see everywhere walking down. He was such hands-on the product that because he wanted everything done his way. He would talk to the announcers in the headsets and shoot them phrases he wanted to say, the right way to say all that stuff. So definitely Vince was more hands on the actual delivery of the product and everything.
Yeah. So did Vince have a specific way he wanted you to wrestle in the ring versus being able to wrestle at WCW?
No, no one's ever told me how to wrestle. The only thing they ever told me was when Jody Hamilton was one of the original assassins. He's like, "You got to get bigger, kid." Because when I first started, I was like, 195, 200 pounds. You got to get bigger, kid. And then they like, we're gonna keep you off a couple weeks, put on a few pounds. I like call them back. Hey, I gained some weight. How much you gain? I said, I gained 10 pounds. All right, we'll bring you back up. So what I would do to try to make up for that, you know, part that wasn't as big as they wanted me to do, I would take really crazy bumps, take a backdrop from the ring to the floor. I mean, you name it, I did the craziest bumps you could think of. And because I was taking all those crazy bumps, the boys would go to the back to the office and say, "Oh, I like this guy. I want to work with him again," stuff like that. So it almost forced them to have to bring me up all the time because the boys wanted to work with me because they knew they were going to have a good match. I could do anything they wanted to. I wasn't going to mess up. My timing was there. I was there for everything. Just it was, makes it easier, makes their life easier.
Explain to me how, when you're doing a backflip and you're landing on the ground, on the floor, yeah, they may have mats that's maybe this much cushion, but you're still hitting the floor. How in the hell do you
Yeah.
protect yourself?
You learn how to take a bump, so if I'm taking a backdrop over the top rope or I'm getting, say, it's just easy as getting thrown over the top rope. When they throw me over, I'm going to grab the rope with one hand and pull myself over, and the other hand's going to go down and hit first, hit the ring apron, or I can just pull myself to propel, go way over, and I'm going to kind of over rotate a little, land on my feet at the same time to break the fall. Then I'm going to land on my back. So, but yeah, it does take a big impact because that's not a guarantee that's going to happen every time. It's what you're trained to do. Doesn't mean it's always going to happen.
Right.
So, um, you know, sometimes you'll get clothesline over the top rope. When you go all the way over, you over rotate and hit the ring side of the ring, which is the hardest part of the ring.
Right.
So, but yeah, it's definitely um, the concrete is very unforgiving, and 30 years later, it still reminds you every morning when you get up out of bed or try to move around that you can't you
Yeah.
do what you want to do anymore
So,
because of what you did when you were younger.
what are your thoughts on the type of bumps like Cactus Jack, or even currently? I'm not sure if you're aware of them, or know of Darby Allen, who just, I mean, the bumps Cactus Jack took was crazy, and Darby Allen does some really crazy stuff. Do you think that they should be allowed to do those type of bumps? Because I mean, obviously, they're going to have a shortened career versus someone like a Ric Flair who's been able to do it for 40 plus years.
Well, they do talk. The old timers always talked about a bump card. You only have so many punches in your bump card, kid. Take your bumps, take your bumps selective, you know. And everyone does it when they first start. Yeah, yeah, yeah. The difference between Darby Allen and Cactus Jack, Mick was a 300 and some guy, 330-pound guy taking big giant bumps. Darby Allen's is about 155, 160 maybe, maybe. So it's not going to be it's not the same.
Mhm.
Even though, yeah, he is punching that bump card up, taking crazy bumps. You know, are they necessary? I don't think so, but the landscape has changed, and um, you have some of these crazy promotions that do stupid stuff. There's no other way to really, clarify, specify it as it's just stupid um, to go out there and do that stuff. So yeah, I mean, they're gonna look at Mick now. He barely can get around. His body is completely beat up, and WCW was concerned about that back when he got there because he was taking those bumps. They were literally concerned for his welfare. You know, Now is Tony Khan concerned about? Well, let's say I don't think Tony Khan is concerned. I don't know. I don't know him personally, but I don't think he's concerned about their welfare because how many are on the injury reserve list right now?
Yeah, that's
There's
true.
probably a lot of guys that are out injured, and they're constantly guys getting injured, and they're getting injured for a reason
Mhm.
because they're taking unnecessary bumps. You can do the same thing, get the same point across without doing something crazy.
Yep,
Yeah, I can see once in a while doing something, but nowadays they do 35 finish moves in the opening match and come off the top of the scaffolding, the
right,
trussing, lighting trussing and stuff like that in the first match. Well, the matches are supposed to be set up to, you know, you
feel,
build up to the main event. They don't do that now. The first
right,
match is, bigger than the main event and
yeah,
stuff like that. So, and they wonder why their ratings just it's because you got to build up to stuff.
yeah.
So,
Triple H
it's just
actually, after the Elimination Chamber, I watched the conference they always have with media, and Triple H kind of said that he's like, look, not every show is going to be this top rated show because exactly what you said, you have to build up to it. So yeah,
yeah.
I do agree that that's missing. I have time for one more question, and then I want you to talk about what you're doing now, promote your podcast, and stuff like that.
Okay.
My last question for you is this: if you could only highlight one match of yours, what match would that be, and against who and why?
Oh man, that's so hard because I had the opportunity to wrestle so many legends that people. Um, I tell you, one a person that had a. There's a couple people. There are a couple significant people. You remember Bugsy McGraw?
Hmm.
Bugsy McGraw, he broke me in the business. After I got trained, they and was wrestling Jerry Bunch. They put me with Bugsy, so I was married to Bugsy on every show, and that was just a lesson in itself. He taught me how to throw a forearm. He taught me how to cut a promo. He taught me how to color. Cut my head. He taught me all kinds of stuff, invaluable stuff. And so I got to wrestle him a lot. And then Blackjack Mulligan was another mentor of mine, and very, very close with Jack. I actually was with him. I took one of my buddies with me and spent about 6 hours with him and Barry on the porch at his place before he passed away. And um, so I think one of the matches was I wrestled Blackjack Mulligan his last match ever,
Oh
and
wow.
and it was the last match ever at the Eddie Graham Sports Stadium, with one the big historic building in Florida for wrestling. So I mean that comes to mind. Um, Another time comes to mind. I grew up going to Lee County Civic Center in Fort Myers when I first wrestled. I first started watching wrestling. That's the first place I went and got to know the guy setting up the ring, Gordon Nelson, the promoter, which was Coach John Heath. He used to send posters. I used to poster the town and everything. So I got to wrestle in that building with WWF. So that was kind of special too. Um, but I think that wrestling Blackjack. I actually wrestled him when Eddie Mansfield had his IWF TV out
Mhm.
at Universal Studios. I wrestled. It was funny. At 1 hour, Jack wrestled a guy named Tony Mella. It was named Tony Mella, named the Lebanese Assassin. He was a big 6'4", 350-pound guy, and Jack no sold everything, just squashed him. And then the next hour, I was wrestling Jack, and Jack was their champion and everything. And I was wrestling under hood, doing a favor for Jack, helping out. And he's like, "Hey, big." He always called me Big Case. Big Case, what do you want to do? I said, "Jack, this is your match. You call it." He's like, "Nah, nah, you call it." I said, "Nah, Jack, you call it. It's yours." And we're arguing. And it was a sign of respect because Jack had a wrestling school and I used to run it for him. And so he was showing his respect by giving me I'm like, "Jack, it's your match." He's like, I said, "If I do it, you're going to be bumping all over the place." So, and I was probably that time 200 pounds. So when I came out and Jack was taking bumps for me, arm drags, hip tosses, I was body slam. People are like just looking like, what the hell? But it was a sign of respect. He was showing respect to me and stuff like that. So I've been involved with stuff with Dusty Rhodes in matches. I wrestled Abdullah the Butcher. I think any of the matches that I wrestled like a legend.
Mhm.
I wrestled Mike Graham where half the ring was broken, and we only can go back and forth on the match. We couldn't go crisscross, and we had a really good 15-minute match. So, I've wrestled all those guys. Kevin Sullivan just going tearing up the whole building, stuff like that. So it's hard to pinpoint just one, but I think any of the legends like that. And it happened that Bugsy, he's still a dear friend of mine to this day. He's 80 years old, sharp as a tack. Kevin Sullivan was a close friend of mine until the day he passed. So was Blackjack Mulligan. Played a big part of my career, molding me, building me. I was able to spend time at Blackjack. With Blackjack, I was able to spend time with Kevin Sullivan when he lived down in the Keys. I stayed at his guest house in Isla Mirada, and then when he lived out in Washington, I used to go out and stay at his place out in the Willoughby Islands out there. And learning the psychology of the business was a huge thing for me. So, I mean, anytime I wrestled a legend, it really, I wrestled Jake the Snake, actually knocked his teeth out one match. He got brand
Oh,
new dentures, and I popped him once, and his teeth went flying out. So, I mean, anytime I got to wrestle someone like that, another one from up in the area you used to watch, remember the Bullet Bob Armstrong?
oh yeah,
Yeah, I got to wrestle the Bullet,
nice.
and he was old then, and I walked in at the hotel because I was good friends with the boys, all the Armstrongs. I was one of the few people to get to wrestle all the Armstrongs
Oh, nice.
and the father.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Brad Armstrong
So,
is one of the man. This guy was so good, and he does
oh
not
yeah,
get
Brad was
the
great.
requisite. He doesn't get the recognition that he deserves.
Yeah. So I got to wrestle the Bullet. And he's like, "Hey, Casey, what do you do? I heard a lot about you. Don't hurt me." I said, "Don't worry. I got you." He said, "What do you want to do?" I said, "Let's start off slow and taper down from there." He's like, "All right, sounds good. I'll see you out there." I'm like, "Okay." Saw him at the ring and we tore it up. So anytime I got to wrestle someone like that, I mean, it's just so special. A
Right.
lot of those guys aren't even with us no more. No one's going to have the opportunity to do that. And fortunate enough that a lot of my stuff you can find on YouTube. There's different names like Mike Casey with WWF, Carl Robertson for the early WCW stuff, or Casey Thompson. And I did a podcast last night. They were watching them all and everything, and they're like, "Wow, you really were there." I'm like, "Yeah." I was fortunate enough to be there, be a part of it. I was a part of WCW during the biggest time of wrestling, during that 83 weeks, during the Monday Night Wars. I was there. So it just makes it special nowadays, especially when the way the business is and everything. A lot of that stuff is never going to ever happen again, but I was able to experience it and be a part of it, so it's just very special.
Okay, so I tell you, it's very special for me to be able to have you on. It's always awesome to speak to a professional wrestler who wrestled during the time era that I was like so
Yeah.
invested in. Let's talk about tell the fans what you're doing now and talk about your podcast real quick.
Yeah, that's basically all I do is the podcast. I've been out of the ring for a long time. I have no desire to ever even go back into a ring, and so I was been friends with Kevin Kelly, who was an announcer for WWF. He did all the Stone Cold, the Rock interviews and stuff like that. Everyone knows who he is. He's been a friend for a long time, 30 some years we've been friends. So I called him once and I'm like, "Hey, Kevin," I said, "I want to run something by you real quick. I had this ideal for a podcast. And I know the market's very saturated and stuff like that, but I don't think there's anything quite like this." So the whole premise of the show In Ring Wrestling Podcast, In Ring is part of the format sheets. So you see they have time codes and it say M and E, so music and entrance, and say Lex Luger verse, it would say In Ring. and they big blank, and they just write the name, and so they write in Casey Thompson. So that's where it came. The enhancement guy was always in ring. So that's how the podcast came. He's like, "Oh, I like that." So I said I wanted to do it because back then I started a couple years ago. I started doing a lot of a guest on a lot of podcasts, and I was like, I called Kevin Sullivan. I said, Kevin, I said, let me ask you a question. I said, I've been doing a lot of podcasts lately. I said, is it because all the boys are dying, or what's the deal? He's like, he's just said, no, I don't think so. He says, what I really think it is because you were there during the most pivotal time in wrestling and you have a perspective. People want to hear what you've seen through your eyes. And that's what it was. And so I told Kevin, I said, I want to bring what I said, say Sting might treat this guy one way, but he might treat another me this way. So I want to bring to people what I experienced in my career and how I was treated and things happened to me as an enhancement wrestler. And so then Kevin was like, and so I asked Kevin, I said, what I'm looking for is like a co-host that can really keep the show, the flow of the show going. And Kevin's incredible. He's just right off the top of his head. We do no show prep, nothing. We just turn on the camera. Our producer goes crazy because he wants everything for he can get the thumbnails ready and all this stuff. And he's like, what are you guys talking about this week? I'm like, no clue. And he'll ask Kevin. He's like, I don't know. And we turn on the mic. And he's like, so Casey, let me ask you a question. And we just start just going. And our chemistry is great together. So I asked Kevin. I said, do you have someone like a young boy or something that might be um, young boy is a wrestling term, by the way. It's not a young boy. It's someone young to the business that's trying to break in, make it, is what
Right.
it means. So
Yep.
I said, you have a young boy that might want to get involved and do this. He's like, yeah, let me look. And so we got back about 2 weeks later talking. He's like, honestly, he said, I would like to do it if you would have me. I said, absolutely. I said, I'll be stupid not to. So that's where it started. And we just said, okay, when you want to start? I said, Sunday. He's like, okay. And we started last November, and it's been going great. We had our first guest, and we have another guest coming up. We have um Buddy Lee Parker, Sarge from the
Mhm.
State Patrol, which he trained Goldberg. He was the head main trainer at the power plant. So there's a lot of stuff. So Kevin was in WWF, like the Montreal Screwjob. He was there, like one of the nitros outside of um, MGM, where they
Yep.
built the stadium, where you seen Kevin Nash throw Rey Mysterio like a human dart into the side of the trailer. I was literally actually right behind the camera when that happened.
Oh wow.
So I have my perspective of that kind of stuff, and he was behind the camera when they were doing the documentary. Bret Hart was doing his documentary, Beyond the Mat, and so we have all this stuff together. Our paths. We started off together. We all went our way, but we've our paths is intertwined throughout years, and that's what we bring everyone on a weekly basis. And we do a lot of telling stuff that happened behind the scenes, things that people always wonder about. Because I'm a really big believer on, like, if you go to a concert, everyone wants to have a backstage pass because they want to see what happens behind the scenes. So we give them that experience where they see what's behind the scenes and what happens, how things are, the process works, how they come up with stuff. So that's all we do. And it's been going really well. We know that it's a marathon, it's not a sprint, it takes time. So that's why he's out there doing podcasts, I'm out there doing it. We're trying to drive a little traffic. And so we're on In Ring Wrestling Podcast. We're on YouTube, Spotify. We're on Apple Podcasts, and all of our social media, from Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, X. It's all In Ring Wrestling Podcast. So
Awesome.
we're just out there just spreading our message, giving our perception of our time in the wrestling business.
That's awesome, guys. That's all. That's awesome, Casey. Guys, look, check it out. Check out In Ring. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. You guys see how great Casey is. And Kevin Kelly, he is absolutely awesome. I love
Oh
Kevin
yeah,
Kelly.
yeah,
I'm
he's
hoping him.
incredible.
I'm hoping to have him on one day. Uh, but yeah, that wraps up our interview. Tomorrow, B. Brian Blair from the legendary Killer Bees is going to be on the podcast. He is going to
Oh,
be doing
nice.
a recap of Monday Night Raw. And it's funny, Casey, because when he decided
Uh,
that he's going to do this, he even said, nah, that means I got to watch Raw Monday night. So Uh,
I knew that. I
yep,
just seen
yep,
Brian not too long ago.
yeah, yeah. And Bob Cooks can be with us as always on Tuesdays. So subscribe to
Yeah.
my YouTube channel so you don't miss these things. Also, a week from Monday, a week from today, we are going to have Mr. Herb Simons. He is been in the business for 50 plus years. He is a huge promoter. He's the mayor of the city he's currently in. He's received awards because of his wrestling promotions. He has dealt with and been able to work with everybody in the wrestling business. Uh, Ace Cowboy Bob Orton, who is the father of my mom went blank.
Randy.
Yeah, of what?
Yeah. Randy Orton.
Yeah, Randy Orton. God, my mom went blank. Yeah, he's the
Yep.
father of Randy Orton. Uh, excellent, excellent. He's an amazing guy. He's doing a lot of the training there, so I'm sure Herbs will talk about that. So again, subscribe to the channel so you guys are able to catch all the different interviews I have coming. And of course, the recaps that we do of the weekly shows. Casey, thank you so much for coming on. I could
Uh,
probably have I not probably I know that if you came back, you could do another full hour because every time you would say something, another question came to mind. So hopefully we can make
yeah.
that happen one day. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Anytime. I really appreciate you having me on and everything. You let me a chance to, share my message and plug our podcast a little bit.
Yep, awesome. So again, guys, thank you for watching the podcast. Again, subscribe, and you guys have the rest of the week. And I will see you tomorrow for the recap with B. Brian Blair and Bob and Bob Cook and my other co-host Mark. We're gonna be doing a recap of Monday Night Raw. Until then, you guys have a great week. Thank you so much, Casey.
Thank you.
All right, cool.